Welcome, my friends. Welcome to the investing lecture on dollar cost averaging basics. This method is classically known as one of the most powerful value investing methods of all time. So let's dive into it and find out how we can use it for our benefit. So we all know that emotions and biases can play around with us while we're investing. It can be very difficult to keep these feelings under control, especially when we're trying to do a lot of analysis, when we have a lot of biases working against us, when we're doing our different techniques, when we're getting data, also in the execution process as well. It becomes very difficult to become super precise and being exactly precise and buying the exact bottom and selling the exact top. These can be exceptionally difficult things to do when you have so many different factors working against you or so many different things complicating it. However, one of the magic tricks about dollar cost averaging is that it makes it almost certain to be approximately right over time instead of being precisely wrong at the wrong times, which is when people try and be too accurate. Dollar cost averaging, like its name implies, tries to average out all the decisions that a person makes to increase the probabilities that they make a good value choice when they're buying in the market. So dollar cost averaging was first brought onto the scene in 1949 by Benjamin Graham in his book, The Intelligent Investor. Any astute investors amongst you would have already heard of this book, maybe you've even read it. So this will be a good refresher for everybody when we get into it. And essentially, dollar cost averaging is the method of spreading out the purchases of an asset over time so that the investor actually receives a lower or the most optimal average low price of that investment over time without the need for additional information. You can see here already how this could potentially be super beneficial for us because we have not only a lower average price when we're doing dollar cost averaging, but we also don't need extra information. So this is quite interesting. Let's dig deeper. What you'll see on the screen right now is a couple of different examples of how this can work. We have dollar cost averaging on a weekly basis here where you, for example, have an amount of money that you're purchasing every single week. You can see that sometimes you buy high, sometimes you buy low, and on average you'll receive a pretty good price because you're constantly buying little bits in the market. But we'll dive into this a little bit later. You can also make it monthly, so you have monthly purchases, and you can also do daily if you really want to go extreme with it. Of course, that is very labor intensive, so maybe weekly would be more appropriate for most people, but you can do what you'd like. Okay, so what you see on the screen next is an example of how this works in practice. So we have two individuals, one doing a lump sum investment and one doing dollar cost averaging. For the individual doing a lump sum investment, they buy 120 RM or dollars worth of their investments, and they purchase 6 shares. As you can see, they can go all the way to the end of the experiment here with 120 still invested and 6 shares because the price didn't go anywhere for them. However, we have an individual here with a dollar cost averaging technique. And this is a great example because not only do we have examples of the price going below the average, but we also have examples of prices going very far above the average as well, all the way up to $40 per share. This is a share example like you'd have in the stock market. So you can see that the amount of dollars or RM in this example being purchased in the market stays consistent because this is dollar cost averaging, meaning that the dollars going in are uniform over time. However, the amount received at the other end is slightly different, but we'll look at this in a minute. So you can see January, February, March, April, May, June, they buy $20 worth of shares at each time, and you can see they receive a different amount of shares. Would this be Bitcoin, you would receive slightly more Bitcoin when the price is low, and you would receive slightly less Bitcoin when the price is higher. It goes up and down, and the dollar cost averaging activity actually takes advantage of this natural volatility in the market. You can see that when it goes all the way up to $40 a share in May, only 0.5 shares is purchased. If you were buying Bitcoin, you'd be buying less of a Bitcoin at this point. But that's okay, because even though the price was very volatile, even though we had a purchase that was very expensive that didn't end up giving us very many shares in return, and even though we did the whole round trip and ended up right where we started, we still, in the dollar cost averaging example, received 8 whole shares at an average cost of $15 per share. How can this be? The average was lower from the entire experiment, even though we ended up at the same position. Now, this is really the magic of dollar cost investing. So this is amazing. How did we end up with 8 shares at an average cost of $15 per share? This is taking advantage of the natural volatility of the market, because when the price was low, we got an outsized benefit for each dollar that we were putting into the market. This natural value that we were extracting from the volatility of prices going up and down really shows the benefit once we reach the end of the activity. Even though we end up where we started, we received a lower average price than the person who just put all of their money in at once. This method, dollar cost averaging, has even been tested against God mode dip buying criteria and has lost in the stock market over the course of many decades. The God mode criteria in this example was foreknowledge of dips. That is, knowing in advance when the dip would end, or like when the dip was, so that the strategy could buy at the exact bottom of the dip between all-time highs, and dollar cost averaging still beat it over time. So it just goes to show the incredible power of dollar cost averaging when deployed correctly. So another benefit of dollar cost averaging is actually the emotional disconnection that it affords us because of the strategic design of it. For example, we have a rule set and it tells us what to do. So we enter into the market and the dollar cost averaging strategy says, okay, you must put in a certain amount of money into the market every week consistently over time, regardless of the price, because the price is actually where the majority of the psychological discomfort comes from. When it goes up and we have bought, we feel euphoric. If it goes up and we haven't bought, we feel panicked. And these emotional cycles can move around and it can cause us to make improper decisions. However, if you're deploying a dollar cost averaging strategy, what you're really doing is you have a rule and the rule tells you what to do. So it affords you that natural emotional disconnection, provided obviously that you have the discipline to follow your rules. But I actually have a graphic that kind of shows this. So on the screen right now, you see a chart, which is going to show